This is Diana Block, and this is your online instructor for principles or financial planning. Financial planning. This is FIN200, and we're going into week 3. And in week 3, we're going to talk about insurance. And there's a lot of information in these chapters 10, 11, and 12, all about different types of insurance. So we'll just get started. When you look at insurance, you have to ask, why do we need that? And there's a lot of reasons why we need insurance. Life happens, and that includes accidents, that includes damages, that includes losses. And you want to protect yourself and your loved ones from those risks that you know could happen on a daily basis. So insurance is all about risk management. You want to protect yourself from any losses and damages, accidents, even natural disasters. And what insurance policies allow you to do is share that risk with others so that when an accident happens, you're able to reach into the pool of insurance money that everyone has paid into and cover your losses. So insurance policies are a method of sharing the risk of all these things with others. And so some of the risks that can happen with your personal property or autos is that you could lose the use of them because they've been vandalized and damaged in some way. They've been stolen, arson, or it could just be damage to the property, but you still have use of it, but it's damaged. Like your property could be damaged in a fire, your car could be damaged in a hailstorm. Things could be damaged in a flood and no longer work property, or there could just be smoke damage to certain articles of property that you have, and you still have it, but it's smoke damage, and so it's not as valuable, and so you need to be able to file insurance to make that right. And so there's different types of liability that you could have, and so when you're setting up an insurance policy, you want to understand fully what kind of liability you're paying for, because that will matter at the time when you're actually having to make a claim. Now, liability insurance is when you're taking responsibility for loss or injuries of another person. In most jurisdictions, auto insurance liability is a requirement, so that if you're driving and you cause an accident, you have that proper liability insurance to cover those damages. Another type of insurance you might come across is negligence insurance. A lot of times this has to do with your home. If you fail to take reasonable care and it causes loss for another person. So if you do not maintain your stairway properly or shovel your snow and then someone falls, the mail carrier falls there, that might be considered negligence, and your insurance may cover that if you have the right policy. You could also have a strict liability policy, which means it doesn't matter if the actions were intentional or negligent. You're just going to take responsibility for that. You might also have vicarious liability, and with that situation, you're responsible for the actions of another person. So, for example, your child actually caused damage to someone's property, or did something that caused someone to have damages, and so since they're your child, you vicariously become responsible for their actions. So a lot of different types of insurance. You have to be very careful when you're setting up a policy of what you're actually paying for. Now, when we talk specifically about homeowners insurance, we're trying to protect against damages to your home, the property and contents of it. Your home generally isn't going to get stolen, so we're mainly talking about damages when we deal with homeowners insurance. So you often, if you have very expensive items, unusually expensive items that are kept in your home, you probably want to have a floater for those specific high dollar items, because your homeowner's insurance is going to be for a specific amount. When they set up the policy, they'll evaluate what it will cost to replace your home if it was completely destroyed and all the contents. So if you have a specific high dollar item that will throw that off, you'll want to get a floater for that, because that wouldn't normally be included in general household items. Like if you have a fur coat that's unusually expensive and worth $50,000, or some sort of DJ equipment that is incredibly expensive that a normal person wouldn't have, you may want to have a floater on those items. And you'll always want to provide a household inventory for your homeowner's insurance policy so that everything that you have in there is covered. I mean, if you have everything from Wolfgang Puck cookware, you want to note that you have that. If you have lots of clothes and shoes, jewelry, whatever it is that you have in your home, if you've got a finished basement and you've got furniture and music collection and a bar down there, you want to go ahead and just have a complete inventory of everything you have in your house. Nothing should be assumed. I don't recommend assuming anything. So then, well, let's talk about auto coverage, because there's some calculations in the assignment this week where you'll have to do some calculations for auto coverage or give an explanation of auto coverage. So I want to make sure we talk about that. Auto coverage is quoted in 3 numbers. And so it might say 100, 350, 100, 350. And when those numbers are in thousands, so that's 100,000, 300,000, 50,000. And the first number is the amount that'll be paid per person in an accident. So if a person is injured in an accident that you are responsible for, this is the maximum amount that will be paid to an individual person. The second number is the amount that'll be paid per accident. So in an accident, more than one person could be injured. You might have hit a car that had 3 people in it. And so each of those people will have their own injury claims, medical expenses. The second number is the total amount that'll be paid to all persons per accident. So in my example, that 300,000, that's the total that's going to be paid in an accident. And then the third number is the amount that'll be paid for property damage. And so that 50,000 at the end is how much will be paid for the actual vehicle that you hit and damage to any property that related to the accident. So if you have a auto insurance policy that's 100, 350, that means $100,000 will go to each person in an accident up to that amount, up to 300,000 per accident for all people, and 50,000 for property damage. So whatever those numbers are quoted, those 3 numbers, that's how you interpret those. Now, let's move on to talk about medical insurance. Medical insurance has been a really hot topic in the last few years, and we've implemented the Affordable Care Act, and medical insurance is now a requirement, just like auto insurance is in a lot of jurisdictions. So let's talk about what's involved in medical insurance. When you have a medical treatment, generally you can have multiple types of expenses. You can have hospital expenses, which is things the hospital charges you for, like the room and nursing care, etc. Then you will also have, if you had surgery, you'll have surgical fees, and that comes directly from the surgeon, and that's different than the hospital expenses. Then you might have just regular doctor's expenses, physician expenses, like visiting the office, having lab tests, having your x-rays read, and things like that. I just had a situation with my son. He had a car accident and he went to the emergency room, and he's just surprised at how many bills he gets, because he got a bill from the hospital for the ibuprofen they gave him for treating him in triage. But then he also got a separate bill for the doctor that looked at his x-rays and gave him treatment there. So he's like, why do I have 2 bills? I already paid this bill. No, you paid the hospital bill. You've also got the doctor's bill that's separate. So keep that in mind. You'll have different types of expenses. Now, you've got various medical plans that you could sign up for. You have major medical, which covers a long-term illness or injury, and then the comprehensive major medical just includes more costs in that. You have like cancer plans and insurance plans that cover if you get a specific illness. You might have a hospital indemnity plan that just pays you when you're in the hospital, pays you a daily amount per day when you're in the hospital as an inpatient. You might have dental insurance, vision insurance. Long-term care insurance is something that's really important because long-term care is very expensive. When you're setting up health insurance, the important things you need to absolutely determine before you sign up for the plan is whether you're eligible and what conditions are eligible. Some insurance may have exclusions of pre-existing conditions. So if you're already pregnant when you sign up for the plan, or you already have cancer when you sign up for the plan, are you eligible? So investigate that. Also investigate what are the exact benefits, how much is covered, and what type of treatments, especially if you have specific needs. And then what are the limits on how much they will pay, how much are your out-of-pocket limits, how much is your lifetime limit on benefits. Those are the important things you need to find out when you're setting up a health plan. Then the last chapter this week talks about life insurance. And life insurance is insurance that if you have people that are depending on you, and upon your death, they may be in a bad situation. Not only are they grieving, but they also have bills that they were depending on you to pay, and you're no longer available, and no longer is your paycheck available. So if you have life insurance, they might be able to pay off a mortgage, continue to have their living expenses covered, your medical expenses. So if you died after fighting a long illness or a hospital stay, you may have medical bills that they'll be left to cover, and your funeral costs. And you might also be able to leave life insurance so that it is an educational fund for your minor children. So very important, especially if you have dependents, to have life insurance. Now the text talks about a few different methods of calculating how much you need of life insurance. The easy method is to just say, okay, I need 70% of my income for 7 years. It's a quick, easy way to just kind of come up with a round figure of how much you might need to leave your family in life insurance. There's another method that says if you have two people, adults, spouses, and no children, and both spouses work, so you're, the modern couple, no kids, both people work, maybe they aren't as dependent on your income. So if you just pay off half of your couple debts, half of your debts as a couple, plus your funeral expenses, maybe that person will be okay. So that's another method, just half your debts plus funeral expenses. Now, if you have a non-working spouse and you want them to be able to continue to provide for your children somewhat in the method that you provided for them together, the non-working spouse method says you can take the number of years until your youngest child turns 18 times $10,000. So, for example, if you have a 3-year-old and you pass away and your spouse doesn't work, you may want to leave them $150,000 because they've got 15 more years before that child turns 18, and you'll leave them $10,000 per year. So all three of those are pretty easy methods of kind of calculating a round figure. This family need method, though, is the most comprehensive, and with that, you actually go through with your spouse or your family and calculate every single thing that they may need if you weren't there. What is their needs for health insurance, housing, education? Instead of just calculating some round figure and doing a quick multiplication, you actually go through and consider everything that they may need if you weren't around. So that's going to take more time, but it's also going to be more detailed and thorough. So there's a lot of information clearly in these 3 chapters for this week. Make sure you review all of the full PowerPoints for the chapters. I just gave the highlights here. And also view all the videos that are in the additional resources area this week. There's some really good videos there. And I'll also send you some links and additional information in the discussion as we go through the week. If you have any questions about your homework, feel free to send me an email. I can help you with the homework. There's only so much I can do in a 15-minute video here. But if you have additional questions about something I didn't cover or about the calculations, I'm happy to help you with that. And so I will look forward to talking with you in the discussion, and I wish you a great week.